Following on from HMS Dreadnought, the Admiralty wanted to build the new type of battleship at the rate of 4 per year. This would make 4 whole battle squadrons, or later divisions of battle squadrons, which would help the fleet when operating as a unit. Being the Admiralty under Fisher, this also of course meant that the next stage of design looked to be more ambitious still. He wanted to build what was termed a fusion ship, combining the armour and number of guns of Dreadnought with the speed of the Invincible-class battlecruisers. Essentially the first fast battleship, only one generation after Dreadnoughts themselves had been invented. This was dubbed Design X4, and was a somewhat odd vessel. In order to reach 25 knots with 10 guns and 11 inches of armour, the layout was somewhat like the Invincibles, with 4 turrets, 1 fore, 1 aft, and 2 amidships en echelon. But the en echelon turrets were triple turrets, to give, in theory, a 10-gun broadside, albeit at the more extreme angles a 7-gun broadside would have been more likely in most circumstances. However, an election saw the government changed, and a new set of politicians wanted to reduce spending. Fisher thought he could have sold 4 of the fusion ships to the previous administration, but not this one. So that dream had to be put aside for the next year, where it would keep being kicked down the road for quite some time to come. And instead, a slightly adapted version of Dreadnought was proposed, with this being a much cheaper option. Fisher reckoned he could get 4 of these ships instead. But government budget cuts would see even this class reduced to 3 instead, which was somewhat unhelpful, although the more optimistic Royal Navy officers hoped that the new ships would be similar enough that Dreadnought might be able to make up the 4th. Thus, the Bellerophon class would closely resemble the Dreadnought in many ways. The main battery was exactly the same: 10 12-inch 45 caliber guns in 5 twin turrets, 1 forward, 1 on each wing, and 2 aft at the same deck level. The secondary battery was improved though, with 16 more powerful single 4-inch guns taking the place of the more than 2 dozen 12-pounder or 3-inch weapons found on the previous ship. These were initially installed partially in superstructure mounts that resembled casemates but had no armour to speak of, along with open mountings both higher on the superstructure and in pairs atop a number of the gun turrets. 3 submerged torpedo tubes, 1 per side and 1 astern, completed the weapon's loadout. Torpedo protection was improved, but at the cost of an inch of belt armour, which dropped down to 10 inches maximum thickness, with 4-inch maximum deck armour and 11 inches on the turrets. The ships displaced just over 18,500 tons normal load, and 23,000 shaft horsepower, the same power plant as Dreadnought, drove the ships through the water, their slightly greater weight offset by a refined hull form, which meant that they could hit slightly more than their designed 21-knot top speed if they were really pushed. The most obvious difference between the Bellerophon class and the Dreadnought was the masts. Dreadnought had a single tripod foremast and a simple pole-style mainmast, whereas the Bellerophons had 2 massive tripod masts. Additionally, someone very smart in the Royal Navy had heard about the barbecuing of Dreadnought's main spotting position thanks to its being placed right behind the forefunnel, and cleverly decided to position the mast ahead of the funnel instead. And there was much rejoicing. Sadly, he wasn't a complete genius, though, as whilst the second mast was also ahead of its funnel, you can see that the smoke and heat from the first funnel might cause a few problems for that particular position. Still, 1 out of 2 isn't bad. This radical trend of not parboiling your own crew continued for a couple of more of the Royal Navy's battleship classes, although for various dark and nefarious reasons this would be reverted in the Colossus and Orion class before once again common sense prevailed. 3 ships would be built: Bellerophon, Superb, and Temeraire, laid down at the turn of 1906 to 1907, launched in summer and autumn 1907, and commissioned into the fleet in the first half of 1909. In the run-up to World War I, the ship stayed in home waters as part of the Royal Navy's new concentration of strength, and during this time the 4-inch guns atop the turrets were gradually moved to the superstructure, with the exception of those on the aftmost turret, which were just removed, along with a couple more from the superstructure, to make way for a small battery of 3-inch and 4-inch anti-aircraft guns in the mid-war period. In 1914, the home fleet became the Grand Fleet, and the 3 ships were gradually transferred to the 4th Battle Squadron, and in 1915, Temeraire almost rammed Dreadnought when both of them went for a ram kill on a U-boat, with Dreadnought beating her younger half-sister to the prize. The Bellerophons were all in the 4th Battle Squadron in time for the Battle of Jutland, where they were positioned roughly in the middle of the line of battle, scoring hits on SMS Wiesbaden and SMS Der Flinger. As the strength of the Grand Fleet grew, with more Revenge-class battleships joining the fleet and then the American 6th Battle Squadron, Superb and Temeraire were released to Mediterranean Fleet service in 1918. Dreadnought having spent some time already heading up 3rd Battle Cruiser Squadron, which was otherwise made up of pre-Dreadnoughts on coastal defence duty, before coming back to the Grand Fleet briefly in early 1918. Thus, members of the Bellerophon class were present at 2 separate surrenders. Superb led an Allied fleet to Constantinople, and Bellerophon would be present at the interment of the High Seas Fleet. After the war, the 3 ships rotated through roles as reserve and training ships. Recognised less than a decade after their commissioning as obsolete, Temeraire and Bellerophon would be sold for scrap in 1921, whilst Superb was used as a gunnery target for a while, before being sold for scrap in 1922.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.